Welcome back. I've got a Woodland Alliance game for you today, which is going to seem like an amazing idea when the first person to pick their faction goes with the despot. Look, I had reasons, I swear. Looking at the draft so far, I figured that the birds were probably not going to be enough to police the badgers on this map, and while I wanted to go with Warlord here, my hand kind of sucked for it, so what I ended up doing was choosing Woodland Alliance. I figure there's nobody in the middle of the map right now, so I may as well set up there. And even though I'm going to lose some tokens to the birds and the badgers, I'll at least get some cards out of it as they have to move into my space, and the card loss will police the badgers a bit for me. Then I was reminded the otters are in the game. Well, shit. With martial law in the pass right now, it means I'm forced to set up on the left side of the board here, or to bank really heavily on being able to set up in mouse, which I don't think will happen. Otters start the game by drawing up a few more cards to fill up their hand, nothing too special. I start my turn by getting some of these annoying tip dialogues because I had to replace my hard drive. There will be more of them. Whatever happens, I know that I definitely want to be able to revolt either of the sympathy I place in this first turn, and fortunately I do have the cards to achieve that. I need this redundancy so much because I'm now on the wrong side of the badgers in order to actually police them, and if I don't get my card draw in line really quickly, I'm not going to be able to actually get in front of them again. The badgers start their turn by encamping twice and then crafting boat builders, which is a pretty commanding way to open the game. They balance this out by forgetting that they need 4 in order to rule the pass, and their first delve costs them a card from their retinue. I do not blame them. They did buy a bird card on this turn, so they are able to put 2 birds into their retinue right away. If there is any silver lining to be found in my initial misplay, it's in the fact that I at least won't be feeding the birds right off the bat. That being said, however, I should have gone Warlord, and I'll probably end up regretting it until I'm dead. For the second turn, the otters start with a bit of crafting, followed by placing some trade posts, using the badger warriors they were given earlier. Getting 8 points this rapidly is pretty respectable, but I worry this probably isn't the best for their tempo. Or I would worry, if I weren't playing against them. On their turn, the badgers spend the anvil to recruit and craft informants. I can't explain this either. And then, in perhaps the most ironic turn of events I have ever seen, they fight the otters, who ambush them. Regardless, the otters lose all their keep warriors, and while the otter player hadn't wanted to start anything with the badgers this early, they have arrived here all the same. I think both of us now lament not picking the rats in this game. Fortunately, I think our badger player will give us time to make up for it. The Eerie, deprived of free sympathy tokens to chew on this early in the game, is relegated to playing a stable strategy until I cross the board somehow. In practice, this sees them claiming the right side of the board and setting up another roost, as well as crafting saboteurs. The otters start their turn by lamenting their choice to burst ahead of the table early, as it has gotten them punished. But with otters now fighting back against the badgers, look at the upside. This is great for the toast economy. At the beginning of my turn, I am forced to make a choice. Either I am a man who believes in my warriors enough that they could get my sympathy across the badgers and set up a second base in a more opportune location, or I'm the type of cold, cynical bastard who would sacrifice good base positioning for more card draw. I like to call myself a realist. In truth, I am on the wrong side of the goddamn Maginot line on this map, and I simply am not going to get very far by hoping that people won't remove my sympathy every turn. I need all the cards I can get. While it is tempting to defend my new sympathy token, I know that my situation is rather tenuous. If I lose one of these bases, I'm pretty much up shit creek. Since I only have 3 officers to work with, better that I just set up someone to organize next turn and defend my bases properly for now. On their turn, the keepers make another purchase from the riverfolk, largely because they find themselves in rather a difficult situation. With my sympathy token on top of their way stations, they can't move their tablet relic back to their way station to recover it. After encamping and recruiting, they only have 3 warriors per clearing to defend their tablets and way stations, and having lost some cards from their retinue, they only have 3 actions to work with. Any significant action the badgers take here would only weaken their situation. I would call it an example of Zugzwang, but they're not really under any compulsion to do anything, so they pass most of their turn instead. Much to my surprise and delight, the birds start their turn by destroying boat builders with saboteurs. Regardless of how new our badger player may be, I think this is the right choice in any game. Setting up an outpost directly next to my sympathy tokens, the birds reveal their current objective. In pursuit of my easy cardboard, the birds have not only extended quite some distance, they've also put a suited recruit into their decree. We'll see if they get punished for it. On their turn, the otters continue to mill through the deck, drawing out both Propaganda Bureau as well as saboteurs. They then decide to craft swap meat, which will no doubt be put to immediate use, bothering both the birds and badgers alike. Even as Woodland Alliance, however, getting Propaganda Bureau for a price of 2 warriors is an offer I can hardly refuse. Saboteurs be damned. Even a single turn's worth of value is worthwhile for Propaganda Bureau, so I mobilize my entire hand in anticipation. While I have the actions available in order to defend my Central Sympathy token now, I only have 1 remaining warrior in my supply, and I'll need it if I want to use Propaganda Bureau, so I guess that sympathy stays unguarded for now. Much like the Badger's last turn, any action I take here would only put me in a worse position. The Badger player, truly a person after my own heart, buys up the saboteurs from the otters and doesn't craft it, instead depositing it directly into the retinue at the end of their turn. I get the impression the Keeper's player is currently feeling like they're falling a bit behind. With the otters mostly absent, they attack one of the eerie roosts, potentially hoping to slow them down and gain some points, or potentially to delve some more. They also take the time to spread out their board position a little more and make themselves less liable to attack. These are all good options, but they don't currently address the major problem the Badgers have right now, which is that I have sympathy on top of their way stations, and they can't recover as a result. With 2 bird cards in their hand, I can hardly blame them for wanting to avoid outrage, but I think they ultimately would have been better served by decamping these way stations and vacating this rabbit clearing so that they can move more towards their relics. Least of all for the fact that their rather passive turn activity means that I have more time to make it across their line and get in front of them. The Eerie continues to play table police by false ordering badgers on top of my sympathy and, commensurately, crafting saboteurs. We really did draw all of them at once, huh? This means I'll probably only get 1 turn with Propaganda Bureau, but with birds starting to accelerate and the fox and bird ambushes in the discard, I can make some good use of it in the turn that I have. The otter player is ecstatic for this turn of events, but I can't help but remind him that he'll be the one responsible for policing the birds. Whether this is true or not is an exercise left for the reader. Strangely, the birds set up a warrior on top of my sympathy token, but they don't actually have a battle with which to remove it, so they end up feeding me a card for free, I guess. While the riverfolk are busy trying to remove the badgers from the pass, I am considering my options for my following turn. With the red and blue ambushes out of the deck currently, the safest choice for me is to Propaganda Bureau my way into the bottom right fox clearing, so that I can destroy the roost there and then organize. However, doing so would leave nothing but mouse cards in my supporters, and that would make my following turn pretty complicated. I would rather retain the flexibility that bird card provides, so I'm going to take the risk and fight the mouse roost instead. This is doubly appealing because if we can manage to take out all of the mouse roosts somehow, the birds will turmoil on recruit, and I won't have to worry about the despot anymore. Their last act on this turn is to attempt to take out one of the eerie roosts, which I am grateful for because it means they're not setting up martial law in the central clearing. It also means the sympathy I'm about to place on the right side of the board will be even harder for the eerie to remove now that they no longer have as many warriors nearby. On my turn, I am glad to pass by the badger line for the first time, setting myself up in the central clearing. I consider whether to craft this bag or to use it to clear a path, but I can ultimately get a lot more value out of it as a sympathy token, so neither of these are really worthwhile. My final card is reserved for Propaganda Bureau, and I can only pray that the birds don't have a mouse ambush ready. Having used 2 of my 3 actions now, I don't need to recruit anymore because I want to use Propaganda Bureau again, if I'm allowed, so I'll pass the rest of my turn. I am now in the position where most players would consider me the problem. With their central way station destroyed, the badgers are now in a position to actually encamp, positioning themselves nicely to recover the relics they have available now. In spite of this, however, they opt to move with their relic on top of me in the center and then battle my sympathy token. I can only presume that they're doing this to preserve some rabbit cards in their hand, but to my knowledge they've already used the rabbit ambush to recruit. The bird ambush in my hand, however, would be better applied elsewhere, so this is one of the extremely rare instances where holding on to it is actually the right choice. At the cost of my sympathy token, however, the fox ambush is out of play, and I see that the otters have the mouse one available. The keepers continue their turn by delving a relic into the center and then attacking the birds, removing another roost. Fortunately, they're not in a position to recover everything they have on the board right now, or else this would be a 13-point turn for the badgers. Only during editing do I realize the challenge the Badgers player was trying to overcome all this time. They're trying to protect their recover column, and unfortunately they are trapped between a rock and my hardest places. They've soaked the cost of removing my sympathy and establishing martial law as much as they can, but they're still not able to get that rule over that third recover clearing that they need. And by choosing the safer route on their turn, they leave at least 12 points worth of relics on the table. I assume the Eerie player must have seen this, because in a decision that's just as mystifying as its creation, they use saboteurs to remove informants. I cannot explain this one either. For the uninitiated among you, the Woodland alliance with Propaganda Bureau is one of the greatest threats you can have in this game. No doubt feeling pressured by the presence of the otters, the Eerie chooses on their turn to reinforce their roost and try to remove my sympathy token. They've been locked into this course of action by the limited cards in their move column, and it is a decision they will sorely regret. My patience is duly rewarded as I am given an opportunity to turmoil the birds by ambushing their lone attacker. With no fallback clearings to rule, the birds cannot build, and thus the despot is no longer my problem. Thusly turmoiled, it takes a mere 4 seconds for the Eerie player to leave this game, a fact that I find deeply hilarious, seeing as this position is eminently recoverable for them. With the birds having been reduced to a vegetative state, the otter player can now freely use their swap meet on me, stealing coffin makers immediately. This would, in most circumstances, be a huge problem, except I also have the saboteurs available. Truly, I deserve this. Through trade posts, tea, and a path, the otters now put themselves up to 18 points. And while otters with coffin makers and 18 points would normally be significant cause for alarm, they have only 5 funds available to them right now, which means they're not going to be bursting the remaining points to the end of the game. I, however, have no such problem. The problem I do have, however, is there's goddamn martial law everywhere now. In spite of our mutual challenges, the otter player is happy to have coffins available, but I have some bad news. Crafting the saboteurs, I spend the rest of my turn using Propaganda Bureau to place sympathy in the most heavily guarded clearing on this map, as at this point I'm into that extra premium DLC sympathy, so I want to get as much of it on the table as possible as fast as I can. With this and an additional move organize, I have officially passed the otters and then some. The table will find it very hard to stop me from this position, as I only have 3 officers and 3 supporters to lose. Destroying my bases, then, will not be sufficient to stop me. It is for this reason that I am alright with leaving my Fox base underdefended. When facing a situation like this in your own games, the optimal answer is to remove as much sympathy as possible, while causing as little outrage as you can, and then remove one of the bases, as it will cause the Woodland Alliance the greatest losses possible. This is, however, very difficult to coordinate. And here, in this game, we have the bird AI, a creature that I hate like deadly poison. The Badgers make their initial effort in service to this cause. However, to avoid the risk of being ambushed, they reinforce the clearings they intend to battle, giving me more supporters. Then it turns out they have no intention of actually battling me twice at all, and fight the otters for control of the pass and another relic. I don't know what their plan is, but I would love to be the otters or birds right now. On its turn, I have no expectations of the bird AI, yet I am still disappointed. One of my chief complaints about this bot is that it will trigger sympathy relentlessly, and finally I am the benefactor of this. On their turn, the otters do some crafting and trade posts and make their way to 23 points before starting battle with my Fox base. If I had the ambush available, this would be a foolhardy decision, but I don't, so they are safe for now. Through Fox Partisans, they're able to guarantee some damage to me, and in hindsight, I should have held on to the base, as there was no way for the otters or anyone else to get more warriors into my clearing to destroy it. Normally the reasoning in these situations is to destroy your base first, as that will lose you all of your supporters, but when you eventually lose the sympathy token that's there, you will at least get one back. That aside, however, losing 3 of my 9 current supporters is a minor loss at best. My victory is now all but inevitable, but for good measure I'm going to destroy coffin makers anyways. I will say that choosing to revolt here was less elegant than just spreading sympathy and using Propaganda Bureau, but it gets us to the same place in the end. With a little bit of extra crafting on top, I successfully overthink my way to victory. And that's the Toast game. Thank you all for watching. Subscribe, or don't. I'm not your dad.